from RVing TV. Today we're going to take a look at a 2015 Chevrolet Volt. Now we are shooting this in 2022. We're right at the beginning of the year in January, so this would be a pre-owned car at this point in time. We thought we'd bring you this review for a couple of reasons. Basically, we have been associated with this car, or I have been associated with this car since it was brand new back in 2015. This was originally my business vehicle with the dealership and is now personally owned by me. It's also the first Volt that I've owned, as if you check our channel, you'll see there's also a 2017 Volt review that we've done previously. But I thought I'd bring this up because there's been a big push for electrification. And customers are wondering, what is a Volt? What's the Bolt? There's Nissan Leaf. There's so many different vehicles. What should I look at? And we wanted to do a review of this Volt because it's a very unique car that is a fantastic car, has a great following. And when you talk to a Volt owner, you're going to see that they really love their car. It's not a scenario that they hate it or it's okay. It's a very flexible vehicle, and I wish more manufacturers went this way. GM was very smart with this design. However, most people are asking for 100% EVs. There's good things about that and bad things. So let's start on this Volt and I'll give you some background. So this is a 2015 Chevrolet Volt. It is what you would call today a Premier. It has all the options on board, including the iridescent pearl paint finish, which originally was a Cadillac only paint finish. And when you look at it, you're going to see different flakes, different colors. It's a very beautiful paint. We've just washed the car. We haven't chamoised it, so it's not quite glimmering as much, but you get it outside and it's absolutely a fantastic paint. We do have lane warning. At this date, there wasn't lane assist where it bounces you in the lanes. It warns you if you're going out of the lanes, and it has collision alert as well through a camera that's mounted up at the top of the windshield. So some nice safety features. A very state-of-the-art car. The Generation 1 Volt was built from 2012 to 2015, and then it went to Gen 2. What makes this car unique is that we do have a 17.5 kilowatt battery. It was the largest battery for the production years of the Volt. And it also had a feature that I believe was integrated in 2014 and the 2015 model called Hold Mode. Now, on battery power, GM says you should get an average of 60 kilometers. Now, they say an average. GM was very different than most EV manufacturers. So let's start with GM's example. They say an average of 60. Well, I can tell you in the summer months, I don't get 60. I get 80, and actually depending on your driving, where you're driving, and even with air conditioning running, I've had days where I've had as much as 105 to 115 kilometers of range. However, in the winter months, it's not 60. You're lucky if you would get that. You're likely going to get somewhere between 35 and 50 kilometers range. The reason for that is you're heating your batteries as well as heating the occupant area. And believe it or not, that robs a lot more electricity and range than you would believe. In some 100% EV cars, RV faux pas because I'm in the RV industry, in the EV market, some cars, even though they're quoting 300 miles, 400 miles, and I apologize for jumping from kilometers to miles, but in some cases, and different manufacturers and dealers will tell you this when you're asked, Because when I looked at buying this car, I looked at a number of competitors, and even today. Ask the question, in the winter months, can I expect to get that range? Because most manufacturers are quoting a range based on ideal situations, and you want to know what their description of that situation is. In many cases, it means no air conditioning, no heat, on a fairly good ambient day. So in Celsius, you're not talking 20 degrees Celsius. You're probably talking 24, 26 degrees and no air conditioning running in your car. If you start getting up to 30, 31 degrees Celsius, those hot, humid days, your range actually decreases. Now, some of you might be scratching your head going, what do you mean? It's warmer. It should be better, especially if you're not running an air conditioner. Well, no. As an example, this car, if it's extremely hot outside, as you're running down the road, what you have to know as a consumer, as you're pulling power out of your battery, you're generating heat. Those batteries are heating up. That heat is detrimental to the life of your battery. So the batteries need to be cooled. Just as in the winter, to get optimal range, your batteries need to be maintained at a specific temperature. So the colder it is outside, the more battery power you're using to actually heat your batteries and keep them in the proper operating ranges. This car, you'll hear it. I've had times I get back, I plug it in, and it starts to charge, and I'll hear the air conditioning system kick on. Not for the compartment inside, for the batteries, to help I shouldn't say air conditioning, the cooling system, to cool and cycle air, because your fans will turn on, cycle air and the coolant to cycle through to cool the batteries, because now you've stopped moving. You're not pulling electricity out generating heat, but you're also not getting any air underneath the car cooling where the battery is. You're no longer cycling the coolant, so the car has to tell those systems now that you're stopped and plugged in to keep doing that to cool the batteries down to proper temperature. And that's where GM was super smart with this car, because it is a smart car. It does those things on its own, so you as a driver don't have to focus on it. This car at its base is just like driving any other car. So we talked about that 60 kilometers range, and that's an average because they're figuring, 80 kilometers to an average person in the summer, 40, 50 kilometers in the winter, you average out at 60, and they're quoting you this average. So you can figure, am I gonna get that range I need? They've designed this car for about 80 to 90% of the population, what they do in everyday driving. And that's how they designed the Volt, so that you could go to work and get back on electricity. However, who wants to have a second car because I need to take a 4-hour trip to go see Aunt Rose, right? Or grandma. I don't want to have to buy 2 cars, one to go to work and one to travel. And that's where the Volt was smart. This is a 100% electric car. You'll see some people call it a hybrid, some people will call it an anomaly. This is an electric car, but it has what GM calls a range extender. The way to think about it is there's a generator, a gas generator on board, and we're going to show you under the hood in a little bit. You can drive this like a regular car, and if you run out of electricity, you don't have to worry. And this happens in my household. When I had my other Volt, the biggest concern my wife had was, oh my God, I see how finicky you get when you drive your Volt. I don't want to worry about all that. And I would say to her, just get in the car and you drive it. You don't worry. And she says, what if I run out of electricity? I said, not a problem. The car manages it. When you're driving down the road, and you reach that point where you run out of electricity, the generator will kick on. It will burn little amounts of fuel to actually generate electricity and put that electricity to the electric motor. It is driven by electricity. This is not a hybrid system where you have a battery power pack for short range and then the engine is still coupled to the drivetrain. 100% electric driven motors here. And that's what makes it more fuel efficient. So even if you drove it on a regular basis, instead of buying a regular car, you're going to burn less fuel here because you're not turning an engine that's turning a flywheel, that's turning motors, or turning your actual gears and driving your wheels or driving an axle shaft to back wheels, which all robs power out of an engine. This generator, or small engine if you want to call it, is turning and generating electricity, which then goes to electric motors. So you're not losing that horsepower anywhere. So you don't have to push that motor as hard, and you get better fuel economy across the board. The nice thing about the Volt as well is now when we talk about taking that 2-hour, 4-hour trip, when we run out of electricity, we can actually, it'll kick over to gas and keep running. Where today you will hear, if you're shopping for an EV, you'll hear, oh, you can charge 80-90% of charge in 40 minutes to an hour. What you need to know is there's 3 levels of charging. You have level 1, which is 110 volt. 110 volt is your household plug. This car comes with a 110 volt plug-in. You can plug it in. It's going to take approximately 10 to 12 hours, depending on whether you're charging on 8 amps or 12 amps, because a household plug is maximum 15 if you're in a newer construction. Or you can charge this level 2, which we're going to show you in a moment, which is 240 volt. Charges the car in full, to full capacity, 4.5 hours. When you hear things like it will charge, a Tesla will charge to 80-90% of its battery capacity in an hour, that's a level 3 charger. The difference is a level 2 is going to be somewhere in the 30 to 40 amp range. Now, when I say 30 to 40 amps, remember that most houses have a 100 amp to 200 amp panel. So if you have a 100 amp panel and you're putting in a garage charger that's taking 30 to 40 amps, that's 30 to 40% of your house power coming in. Less of a concern when it's a 200 amp panel. Now try putting a level 3 charger in at home. One, it's going to be extremely expensive. We're not talking $1,000 or $2,000, you're probably talking $8,000 or $10,000. Also, level 3, like a Tesla charges, and many new EVs can charge. To get that quick charge, you're talking 70, 80, 90 amps or more to get that fast charging. The Volt is not capable of level 3. One, GM said most people aren't going to have access to level 3. When they developed the car, it really wasn't out there as an infrastructure to be used. Also, and here's a little EV education, when you charge your battery that fast, we talked about generating heat when you're using the power in your battery. It's going to be the same when you charge it. The more charge you put in, the more heat it generates, which can shorten EV life in your batteries. GM engineered the Volt that you're actually never using more than 75 to 80% of the battery. The reason they've done that is they've found when you charge and when you discharge, the battery. If that battery retains that 20-25% charge, you actually get longer life because you're never draining your battery 100% and pulling it back up. Plus, by using the lower amp charging system, it takes longer to charge, generating less heat, which gives you longer life. If you read in a number of the forums, the Facebook groups that talk about the Volt, you're going to see people reporting battery life that's astonishing, that they have years and years and miles on batteries that have great battery life. This vehicle right now has about 115,000 kilometers on it and is still getting original distance on its battery. So that's a little bit of EV background as well. Fuel economy, right at the moment, we are, and I'll try to get this miles per gallon for our US cousins, I believe we're about 2.67 liters per 100 kilometers. And that's a little high because we were down as low as about 1.8, 1.9 liter per 100 kilometers for lifetime usage. Back a little while ago, we've had, prior to COVID, some large long distance trips where you're running gasoline only. And when I say long trips, I've taken 10, 12-hour drives where I'm not stopping to charge. I'm running out of electricity and I'm driving on gas, or I'm starting to drive on gas, saving my electric charge for in-city driving. So the 2014, 2015 Volts have a feature, we'll talk about it now, called hold mode. Hold mode allows you to engage it, and it means exactly that. Hold on to my electricity. Don't use my electricity. I want to use it at a later time. In places like Europe, when you go into the city of London, they have congestion charges, etc. If you're running on electricity, you don't pay that. So somebody coming from a little further away that's beyond the electric range of the Volt can say, I'm going to use a little bit of fuel to go down the interstate. When I get to the city limits, I'm going to switch over to electricity, where I'm going to be able to get more regeneration from stoplight to stoplight, moving down the road at a slower speed, where the electricity is a lot more efficient and I get a lot further range. An example of that is one day I had to go to downtown Toronto, and I was coming from north of Barrie. And I actually did that, used a little bit of electricity starting my trip. When I got onto the highway and going down the 400, I put hold mode on to hold my electricity. Well, I went downtown Toronto, get down, get off the highway, disengage hold mode, I'm back in 100% EV mode, and I'm driving. I'm driving through the city, and I forget the exact numbers, but I'll give you an example. Got into the city and had 26 kilometers left of electric range. When I left the city to head home, after going to a meeting and having to drive around a little bit to get there and then get back to the highway, when I got back on the highway, I had 29 kilometers of electric range. And you're sitting there going, wait, how did you have more kilometers after you were driving? Well, that's stop and go traffic by using the low mode, which is a higher regeneration. When I'm traveling at a slower speed, I'm very efficient on electricity. When I was coming up to a red light or traffic was slowing and I used the lower regeneration, it was actually recapturing electricity that had been used. And if you do it right, you can actually go through some of those scenarios and gain mileage. Also, remember I mentioned this is a smart car. The car is always recalculating your range based on your driving style and what's happening. So you could get in this car on a cold day and it says you have 30 kilometers. You start driving a little bit quicker, you turn up the heat, and all of a sudden you glance down and it says, whoop, you got 29 or 28 kilometers of range, because you're consuming it faster than when you originally started. So it's always evaluating that driving style. But the regeneration can get you more mileage, especially in city. Great feature with the hold mode. Now, a couple of modes. You have 4 in total. So you have EV mode, which is your standard mode as soon as you start your car. You can select down to sports mode. Sports mode sharpens the throttle response, makes it a little bit quicker, a little sportier, exactly what it says, a little sportier to drive. However, you have to be careful, because in that sportier mode, you can use electricity quicker. Then there's a mountain mode. Mountain mode has been designed that if you're doing large hill climbs, it will actually save a little more reserve of electricity and kick the generator in at a slightly higher RPM to generate more electricity, knowing that you're using it for larger hill climbs. Hence, it being called mountain mode. And then of course you've got your hold mode, as I mentioned, which tells the car to run on gas. Oddly enough, when you're in hold mode, a great little feature is, at times, it's still going to turn the engine off, because it's going to realize you've built up some extra electricity. You're going to see it hold the specific amount, but as I mentioned, because of regeneration, when you go down hills and you coast and you pick up electricity because it's regenerating, you'll see that that generator will turn off because you've built a residual of electricity, and that helps extend your fuel economy. And it will do it seamlessly with you having to do nothing. Same when you run out of electricity. It will kick the generator on to run, but that generator will not run 100% of the time like a regular car. It will turn itself on and off seamlessly based on, does it need to be running all the time? Are you coasting down a straight? Are you going downhill and generating some electricity that's going back into the battery? So it'll kick on and off, giving you better fuel economy. In most cases, when I've had passengers in the car and we're actually kicked over to the generator running, most people never notice it. I'll actually have to point it out that it's turned on, it's turned off. I do that because people find it neat to know that the car's doing this automatically. What's also nice, heaven forbid you get yourself into a situation where you've run out of that electric range that it tells you, and you ran out of fuel for some reason. You've really gotten to that point. If that was a traditional EV and you've run out of range, you've stopped. You're done. You need to charge it. Remember, we talked about that reserve, that 20-25% of reserve that it keeps in the battery for charging purposes, recharging. If you really get into a dire strait, there's not fuel for the generator, you've technically gone through your EV range, the car will go into a limp mode and start to use some of that reserve to get you potentially to that next spot. And that's kind of a neat little feature. It's really that hazard in case. But really, you'll never need to worry. Now, the Volt is one of those few cars, because of this combination of EV with gas generator backup, that you won't have range anxiety. I have driven some pure EVs, and there have been a few that have given me some range anxiety because I've literally been counting the kilometers, figuring to the next charge station because it was really hot that day or needed to run some heat and it was going to be close. I've never had that in the Volt. The other nice thing is right now, because EVs are becoming popular, there have been a few situations in the winter months where there have been 8, 10, 12-hour standstills on highways. And there's questions coming out, man, if I'm in an EV, will I have enough range to keep heat going if it's minus 20, minus 25? Again, with the Volt, because of that generator, you have that extra ability that it can be running and heating, and it's actually more effective with heat. Will generate more heat when that generator's running than heat off of the batteries. Today you're seeing the car with its winter tires on. We do run aluminum rims, a little bit lighter weight for the car, and we're running Yokohama tires just to have a better winter tire, because with EVs what you need to watch with your tires is that they're normally a low resistant rolling tire, harder rubber, and you'll find even in the fall, the late fall, don't even have snow, but when the roads are getting colder, the temperature outside is getting colder, you're gonna notice your car is a little slicker because the hard rubber is having even a harder time at sticking to the pavement. The low rolling resistance is meant to not inhibit the car rolling down the road. Unlike a sports car where it has a stickier tire and you wear your tires faster. You'll get longer life out of your tires, but it's because they're not wearing as fast, the rubber's harder, and even though they're rated as an all season, you really do not want to drive it in the cold weather, or especially as snow starts to come down. I speak from experience. One year we had an early snowfall, and it was days before I was planning to put the winter tires on, because the weather had been nice and it just turned on a dime. The weather dropped, and instead of getting rain, we got snow, and I will tell you, it's the one time that I didn't enjoy this car. Out of all the years, it was a little frightening because the cold rubber, the hard rubber, really did not give it a great road presence. So you'll need to go over, whether it's a Volt or an EV, over to a winter tire that is going to stick better in the winter months. You're going to suffer a bit of range for it, but the safety is the big key. Let's take a look inside. I'm going to come over, grab the camera. We'll go take a look at the car, its seating configuration, and some of the features.